So 3 days ago, we posted up our news and analysis episode for January. But in those 3 days, Disney had a big news dump. So has Universal, which announced 2 regional parks in the U.S., neither of which will be in Florida or California. So instead of waiting for February to explore all of these changes, I'm posting up what I think will be a 25 or maybe 30-minute addition to our monthly news episode so that all of you are updated with everything that has happened in the last 24 hours. I'm hoping to post up this, at least what in my mind I'm calling the News and Analysis Special Edition, for drive time later this afternoon. But I'm going to have to work fast to make that deadline, so let's jump in and take a look at everything. The announcements about the Universal parks, which I will touch on later in this episode, were a complete surprise. But a number of the Disney announcements are things on which we've speculated in recent episodes. All of the Disney announcements have to do with the American parks, but the most interesting element, for me anyways, is that these changes, when taken together, represent a shift in how the company is viewing fans of the parks. And for the first time in a while, it's a positive change. Some of these changes represent a reduction in costs, others represent added benefits, and all of them together suggest that the C-suite is finally listening to what fans have been saying for many, many months now. Admittedly, at least one of these changes was in the works back when Chapek was still in charge, but others are likely attributed to Bob Iger's team, who at least in years past was far more attuned with the needs of fans. There also appears to be a strategy in releasing multiple announcements all at once, creating a purposeful, cumulative effect to demonstrate that the direction of the company, particularly with resort management, is now changing. Signal theory is a discipline devoted to examining how messages are sent and received. In terms of corporate signal theory, a signal is effective when it's perceived as believable or truthful by customers. Back in December, Bob Iger sent a holiday message to Disney fans. People signed up with D23, with annual passes, and with other email connections to the company. In it, he tried to explain that under his watch, good things were coming. Toward the end of his email, he concluded, "Looking at all the opportunities ahead, I can honestly say that there has never been a better time to be a Disney fan." Online, a number of sites mocked this email, as it was perceived as empty words, similar to Chapek's empty words about the positive future of the company. In terms of signal theory, this was a failed signal because it wasn't perceived as an honest or as a convincing message. And I do believe that Iger's team recognized, based on the response, that this email was a misstep. The next message the company sent, indicating that the company was improving, was a deep list of changes as they relate to the parks. I do feel that, though there is still a ways to right this ship, this second message will be perceived as more believable and therefore a more successful signal, which is almost the surely intended effect of such a deep and wide list of changes revealed all at once. There is also a trade-off here. For years outside of the D23 Expo, Disney has released information in driblets, guaranteeing that most every day or two, some piece of news shows up in the social media feed of most fans and is also echoed by a few papers, specifically the LA Times, the Orange County Register, and the Orlando Sentinel, and if the company is extremely lucky, is picked up by other news outlets, including some TV coverage. The change in strategy here suggests that executives at Disney understand that the way they signal right now needs to change to overwhelm fans with news that convinces them that the Disney corporate narrative, at least as it relates to the parks, is actually changing. So let's look at these announcements, and you can decide for yourself if they convince you that under Iger, the company will change in significant ways in a positive direction. We'll start in California. A few months ago, we discussed how the prospect of a recession would likely change the pricing structure at the American resorts. Historically, during economic hard times, Disney World cuts hotel rates but mostly leaves ticket prices alone, while Disneyland focuses on ticket prices, hoping to recoup profits on meals and souvenirs. For a couple of months now, Disney World has offered up deep discounts on hotels, which reveals that reservation levels there are soft, at least through summer. But the other half of this equation, a pricing change in Disneyland tickets, didn't happen until yesterday. Disneyland announced that it will increase the number of low-priced days at its parks. Disneyland will now have roughly 60 days where a single park ticket is $104, which is the resort's lowest tier. This is in addition to the current offer for Southern California residents. Southern California residents can visit on 3 weekdays between January 2nd and May 25th for $219, which is $73 per day. Both of these promotions are a way that the Iger team is signaling that it doesn't want the California park to be an exclusive kingdom for the upper middle class. But there are also practical elements here as well. Disney doesn't release attendance forecasts, but the company, through its hotels and park reservation system, has robust ways to forecast future attendance. Among other things, these pricing structures, arranged as they are, reveal that Disney definitely sees a reduction in attendance in the months ahead, with the parks being particularly empty on weekdays. We talked about this possibility 3 months ago, and these two ticket pricing plans are Disneyland's attempt to capture whatever audience is available over the coming 5 months. And in doing so, Iger's team is also able to push back against the narrative that Disney parks are only for the rich in a way that should have meaningful consequences. The second announcement concerns park hopping. Presently in California, guests with a Magic Key Pass or a Park Hopper ticket can park hop starting at 1 p.m. Under this new plan, park hopping will begin at 11 in the morning. I believe what has happened here are two things. First, I believe that the resort has concluded that early morning arrivals target specific attractions. At Disneyland, these include Rise of the Resistance, Peter Pan's Flight, Indiana Jones, and Space Mountain. At DCA, these include Web Slingers and Radiator Springs Racers. And by 11 a.m., these early morning arrivals have experienced those high-demand attractions they most want to visit in their first park, and that park hopping after this wouldn't significantly affect lines at any of these attractions. They've also probably concluded that park hopping as it exists now doesn't mean that people primarily leave DCA for Disneyland, but that there is a reasonable exchange of guests moving in both directions. Regardless, this change allows the California parks to function in a fashion far closer to the way they did pre-pandemic. It will be interesting to see, though, if this policy remains once we get to the high visitation period of summer, where having guests locked into one park until early afternoon might prove more advantageous, particularly for key attractions. Next, all on-ride photos are free for all guests at Disneyland. So in many ways, this makes a lot of sense. I suspect that the money Disney collects in California from guests buying PhotoPass photos is minimal. They likely stand to gain more through exposure when guests download those photos for free and post them to social media, which works as a natural advertisement flow for the resort. In Florida, all this is a different story, where many guests see their visit to Disney World as their yearly vacation and are more likely to buy a PhotoPass package. But in California, it's mostly locals visiting the park for a day who aren't overly interested in purchasing photos of their day out. But if those photos are offered for free, they will post them all over social media. Lastly, Disneyland announced that in the near future, Magic Key Passes would be available for a limited time. And this too we talked about a few months ago, that an expansion of the Magic Key program would be a way for Disneyland to partially fill its parks if it saw a lower number of guests with day tickets in the months ahead. Some of you are probably aware that back in mid-November, for about 2 days, Disneyland reopened Magic Key sales. I'm fairly sure this was not an expansion of the Magic Key program. After the worst of the pandemic, Disneyland reopened its annual pass program on Wednesday, August 25th, 2021, with Magic Key tickets. Disneyland stopped selling the Believe Key 2 months later in November, with other Magic Key options removed in the months that followed until finally no Magic Keys were available. The vast majority of Magic Key tickets, however, were sold between late August and early November 2001 to fans who were eager to purchase them. What we saw this last November wasn't an expansion of the Magic Key program. It was simply a release of new Magic Keys, likely related to the number of people who originally purchased them in 2021, but didn't renew them in 2022. Disney was simply backfilling gaps left by people who didn't renew. What Disney seems to be signaling now is that they are willing to actually expand the number of Magic Keys in the months ahead to new users as a way of filling the park with more annual pass holders when fewer people, due to the economy, are unwilling or unable to buy day tickets to visit the parks. And now let's shift over to Disney World in Florida. Some of the changes at Disney World are similar to those at Disneyland, yet with important differences. In our January news and analysis update, you know that episode that was just posted 3 days ago, we discussed how Genie Plus, based on its selling out in California over the winter holidays, was running at a higher rate of success at the current price point compared to the situation in Florida. So some of the changes to the Florida resort are tied to increasing the value and therefore the sales rate of Genie Plus. The first update for the Florida resort concerns on-ride photos, and this is a quote from the news release. Beginning in the next few months, guests purchasing Disney Genie Plus service will also receive digital downloads of their Disney PhotoPass attraction photos taken in the park on the day of their purchase at no additional charge. As opposed to the Disneyland plan, which would just release all photos without cost, the Florida plan will require some coding so that the photos are only delivered to certain guests who have activated Genie Plus on that day. This means that 2 different guest tracking systems will need to be linked, and this will take some effort as well as some testing. But this first change, I would say, is more aligned with elevating the value of Genie Plus in Florida to increase sales. The second change in Florida is more significant. One of the largest gripes that I've heard in the past 3 years concerns the way that Disney, particularly in Florida, is nickel and diming guests with added fees for things that used to be free. This includes Genie Plus instead of free Fast Pass, the removal of the Magical Express, the replacement of extra evening magic hours with paid evening events, and the implementation of paid parking at the resorts. Of these 4, the 2 that I believe are most significant to guests concern the loss of the free Fast Pass system and the removal of Magical Express. Magical Express, up until last year, was managed by Mears, an outside company who, after Disney ended their contract, set up their own bus-based shuttle service from the Orlando International Airport to hotels on the Disney property and nearby locations, pretty much in the manner of Magical Express, but with a cost of $32 per adult round trip. I suspect if it were possible, the return of Magical Express would be the most significant nickel and dime add-on to undo from the past few years. It would also be the one that would most benefit Disney, as it would keep more guests on Disney property as they would arrive at their Disney hotel without their own transportation. Right now, the lack of Magical Express encourages some on-property guests flying into MCO to use services like Mears Connect, and others to get a rental car, which gives these guests easy access to non-Disney restaurants and non-Disney theme parks. My guess is that Now that Mears has started their own service, Disney likely found it very difficult to undo the removal of Magical Express as it relied on an outside transportation system. Also, Disney seems committed to finding a way to make Genie Plus a profit center in Florida. So the option they are undoing concerns paid guest parking at the resort hotels. This is the official announcement. Beginning this evening, January 10th, overnight self-parking will once again be offered complimentary to guests staying at the Disney Resort hotels at Walt Disney World. For many, free parking will shave hundreds off the total price for a week-long Disney vacation, as the cost of self-parking ranged from $13 to $24 per day. And this definitely is designed to begin to undo the narrative that the Florida resort is endlessly charging for services that used to be free. In many ways, for me, this is the key announcement in terms of the Florida parks this week. The third announcement concerns the park reservation system, and this too we've talked about on previous episodes. In its current state, the park reservation system, in terms of the work it is supposed to accomplish, is overkill. Clearly, there are benefits to having a park reservation system during peak visitation times, such as the week after Christmas and on many weekends. But there are other periods, such as most every weekday in January and February, where demand by itself will ensure that crowds never become problematic in any of the parks. Beyond this, Disney already has very rich data to know with a high degree of certainty how many people will be in the parks on any given day. Disney manages over 30,000 hotel rooms on its Florida property, and they can easily extrapolate reservation numbers combined with historical trends to arrive at a very accurate estimate as to how many guests overall will be in each park on any given day. I believe that this week's announcement likely is the first step in a reduced reservation system. I don't think reservations will ever go away entirely, as they are useful both for guests and for management during certain periods. But I think that, over time, the reservation system will be scaled back even more beyond this initial announcement, which concerns only annual pass holders in Florida. Here is that announcement. Beginning in the next few months, Walt Disney World annual pass holders will be able to visit the theme parks after 2 p.m. without needing a park reservation, except on Saturdays and Sundays at Magic Kingdom Park. Pass blockout dates will continue to apply as they do today. So this announcement represents a pivot away from the reservation system. And this is something unique to Florida, whereas in California, the resort is keeping the reservation system, as overcrowding from locals has been a serious concern in the past, particularly in the evening, as Californians with annual passes historically have dropped by the parks en masse after work. And lastly, at least for now, Disney World is keeping its 2 p.m. time for park hopping. The park hopping restrictions make more sense in Florida, as one of its 4 parks is far more desirable to visit than the other 3. My personal ranking of the Florida parks, based only on what I enjoy most, goes in this order. Number 1, Epcot. That is, when it's not a construction zone, and ideally, if it were transformed back to its 1988 version when the original Future World rides were all still there and after the seas and Norway had opened. Number 2, Animal Kingdom, a deeply themed and original work of design focused on wildlife and conservation. Number 3, Magic Kingdom. And lastly, Hollywood Studios. But in this, I am surely out of step with the vast majority of visitors. A significant number of visitors, if the resort amended its park hopping hours, would leave their first park and head to the Magic Kingdom, leaving that park to absorb a higher percentage of the crowd burden. And beyond this, it would cause a number of guests at Animal Kingdom to park hop before lunch. after visiting Kilimanjaro safaris and taking in the various animal exhibits throughout the park. So the shifting of park hopping hours would adversely affect Animal Kingdom, especially as it still has no evening entertainment to keep guests in the park all day, and it would also adversely affect the Magic Kingdom, as it would encourage higher crowd levels there earlier in the day. But overall, to me, this package of announcements is a very positive development, one in which Disney executives are responding directly to the fan community, which is an acknowledgement that for the past few years the company has alienated fans and their concerns. And all of this matters right now because beyond the recession, Disney is moving into a vulnerable position in terms of its parks. In Florida, Universal is opening a third theme park in 2025, and just today, Universal announced that it would open not one, but two regional parks, each based on one aspect of the overall Universal brand. Disney parks, when they're working, have a cohesive, identifiable identity. This is probably best seen at Animal Kingdom, which is focused on nature and conservation, even when it includes otherworldly attractions related to Avatar. The Universal parks, in contrast, are a mismatch of interesting worlds and experiences related very generally to film. Universal appears to be in the process of creating regional parks related to one aspect of their overall brand identity, thereby creating smaller but more thematically cohesive projects. Universal announced that on 97 acres in North Texas, it would create, and here I will quote, a one-of-a-kind theme park unlike any other in the world, specifically designed to inspire fun for families with young children. The park appears to have 4 areas, each based on kid-friendly films and shows, including the Jurassic World-related show Camp Cretaceous, Shrek and possibly other DreamWorks IP, Trolls, and How to Train Your Dragon. The 97-acre plot is inclusive for the entire project, including parking and a hotel, which leaves probably about 40 or maybe 50 acres for the park itself. So this would be a park far smaller than all of the Disney and Universal parks, perhaps about 2/3 the size of DCA. And second, it was more or less leaked that Universal was developing a 20-acre project in Las Vegas as part of an expansion area to the Area 15 development. Area 15 is also that location for the Vegas-based Meow Wolf project. The new Universal mini park will be horror-themed, suggesting it will be some permanent offshoot of another part of Universal's overall identity, its yearly Horror Nights events. Initially, this wasn't an official announcement but was bundled, likely by accident, with stock news released in the morning, but by the afternoon, Universal had put together an official announcement. Again, I'll quote from the press release. Straight from Universal Parks and Resorts, the creator of Halloween Horror Nights, the world's most popular global Halloween event, comes a brand new permanent entertainment experience in Las Vegas. This original concept will bring to life Universal's vast library of classic horror films and today's most terrifying tales, with a variety of unique, immersive, fantastic, horror-centric experiences that surround high-energy food and beverage spaces by day, turned haunting bars and eateries by night. The new concept marks the first time Universal has created a permanent horror experience beyond its theme parks. And since there are 2 announcements today, I'm wondering if there might be other regional projects that Universal is presently exploring. Universal's footprint with these new parks is presently in the southern half of the U.S., from California all the way over to Florida, and it seems likely that a company with a regionalization plan might also look to the Northwest, the Chicago area, and the Northeast for other projects, perhaps based on other parts of their overall brand. Noticeably missing from these 2 parks is something that would speak to the Wizarding World and also to Super Nintendo World. Beyond this, in many ways, both of the Universal plans remind me of Walt's own attempts to regionalize Disneyland back in the 1960s. In Monterey, in St. Louis, and in shopping areas across the U.S. On Bandcamp, we have many episodes that explore each of these projects, which are Riverfront Square, Project Spring, and Project Satellite. There's also a possible downside to regionalizing parks. A local park built in Texas or Nevada may satisfy guests' desire for a Universal Park experience and then slightly decrease the number of guests who fly out to Florida. This was also a concern factor for Walt Disney 6 decades ago. But overall, the Universal announcement today is going to place more pressure on Disney to expand its own parks and projects in the U.S. during a time when it has nothing of substance in the pipeline for Florida or California, and when it has been diverting some of its design resources to residential projects, such as the Story Living community in Palm Springs. But to get back to our main point, which are the set of announcements made this week, I do feel that they effectively signal a change in direction at the Disney company, but also that they are hopefully only the first step, as there's still some work to get the company's relationship with park fans back to where it was a few years ago. But hopefully, there will be more announcements like this in the months ahead. So, unless there's another big news dump later this week, I'll be back on Sunday with a new episode that continues our story of Disney artist Herb Ryman. As you know, we're an ad-free, listener-supported podcast. We do just two things: deep dives on stories related to the history of the Disney studio and parks, and news and analysis of current events as they relate to the Disney company. We are funded entirely by listener contributions. You can support our efforts by becoming a monthly Bandcamp subscriber. On Bandcamp, you'll find over 100 episodes not available on iTunes, including those on Walt's proposed regional parks in the 1960s, Project Spring, Project Satellite, and a multi-part series on Walt Disney and Riverfront Square. But the best reason to join is to support the work we do here. You can become a monthly subscriber at dhipodcast.bandcamp.com. I'll also leave a link down in the show notes. Until then, this is Todd James Pierce.